What is going on, guys? My name is Glenn. Today I'm bringing you guys yet again another video, and for today we are going to be talking about eLevate, who have recently announced their fourth. For those who don't know, Remy actually was replaced on the roster. I was going to make a video about it, but I was like, you know what, I'm not going to make a video about it and then talk about who they could potentially pick up. Might as well just wait until they actually have officially announced it. The reason why, and for some people might be a little bit curious, as the Call of Duty World League, we are currently in, it's currently Wednesday, but they didn't actually have any matches on Monday because they're going to be playing in the match of the week over on Thursday. So they don't really have to worry about it. Like, they didn't have to make their announcement as soon as the Call of Duty World League started up. They actually waited and actually announced it maybe like 15 minutes ago at the very most. So if you guys would like to see eLevate's release on it, I will have a link down in the description where you guys can go in and check on that, or click on that, I guess you could say, and kind of read up about it. I can kind of go over it really quickly. They didn't really talk about it too much. All it really was is essentially just a interview with Felony about what he thinks for the new roster. Essentially, he just says that he thinks it's going to work out well. He's really excited to be grinding with these guys. And he actually mentions in one of the questions, he was like kind of saying essentially that he's not really played with these guys in the past. Like, this is like they've only in a few wagers that they played, and they haven't really scrimmed together. So I was gonna wait to make a video until after we saw their performance in today's league match, but they're gonna be playing Opti Gaming, and I'm not taking anything away from what potentially could happen because we saw a number of different surprises for Tuesday. But I'm just gonna go ahead and wait. I don't think we're gonna see an accurate, I guess you could say, assumption of what this roster is gonna be like. And even if they did beat Opti Gaming, or if they did beat the team, a team who was a little bit lesser than Opti Gaming, so they're playing like I don't know, like an H2K or something like that. Not taking anything away from H2K, but you guys can kind of get what I'm saying here. I probably still would have made the video now anyway, just because we're not gonna see an accurate, you know, tale of what these guys are going to be like until like 2 or 3 weeks down the line. So for those who don't know, in the Call of Duty World League Stage 1, I can go and pull up the stats really quickly. As far as eLevate went, eLevate ended up finishing in 4th with a 13-9 overall record. As far as maps go, they went 48-45. The overall team KD was a 0.99. As far as their game type records went, they ended up having a 9-13 hardpoint record, a 20-8 first place search and destroy overall record, an 8-14 uplink record, and in CTF they went 11-10 in overall map records, making that their S&D was the only game type besides CTF what they actually had a positive KD in. Their hardpoints were 0.97 and uplinks were 0.96, just in general to kind of give you guys a little bit of a backstory on what this roster was kind of like. So throughout the very beginning of Black Ops 3, because I actually had casted over eLevate at the very beginning of Black Ops 3, you know, once this TR roster kind of formed, because this is the team revenge of old. Everyone was like, you know, throughout the Advanced Warfare season, obviously after TR had kind of broken up after their second place, so their runner-up to champs. Once that had concluded, they obviously went over to ESWC, kind of knowing, because Team Revenge had kind of split up at that point, but they did announce that ESWC would be the last event that these guys would play together, at least for a while, because of course, you know, heading into Black Ops 3, they would reform back. So once ESWC would kind of come to an end, obviously the guys of Team Revenge, being Vicento, Remy, Nagafin, and Aqua, would all go their separate ways. Aqua and Nagafin would go over to Prophecy to join alongside of Aches and Apathy, who would, you know, go on for a little bit of time, and they would end their run over at Season 3 relegation. You know, they didn't really have the best run over on Prophecy, so Nagafin would end up leaving Prophecy to go over to Epsilon Esports NA, which he would join alongside of Swanee. He'd rejoin alongside of his teammate Remy, and they would also pick up a player known as Royalty, who everyone knows now to be on 100 Thieves right now for Stage 2. Vicento went over to Orbit to kind of conclude his Advanced Warfare season to later join alongside of eLevate. Aqua, after leaving Prophecy, would later go over to Team Envious, which he would be playing with, I believe, Octane, Looney, and JCap. Right before MLG World Finals, he decided to go back actually over to Epsilon Esports.NA, where he would join up with Nagafin, Remy, and Parasite, due to the fact of Swanee leaving, Parasite kind of coming in, and you know, Royalty being knocked off the roster, which still to me, until this day, I'm still not exactly sure why. So at MLG World Finals, that Epsilon NA would be forming together. We were so close to finally seeing the Team Revenge reunion come back, because 3 players are playing with one another. Vicento's still over on Orbit, and everyone was waiting, you know, would eLevate finally pick up the whole TR roster? They got 3 of them, where they pick up Vicento, and it ended up happening. So TR obviously came back to form back over on the side of eLevate. Well, they have a pretty good season, like I said. They kind of give you guys a little bit of a history lesson on where they've kind of come from throughout their entire careers. They play pretty well. I mean, obviously they end up finishing 4th. They were kind of, to me, throughout all of Stage 1, to be considered kind of a team under the radar. I was going to say an underdog, but not really an underdog, but a team kind of under the radar for the most of the season, because they ended up finishing 4th. I mean, they outplaced what? Envy. They outplaced Complexity. They outplaced some really talented teams, and you have a 20-8 overall search and destroy record. Just goes to show how talented these guys really were kind of heading into the regular season. So, you know, with that in mind, the decision to go ahead and drop Remy to me is kind of a surprising one. I'm not really sure if this to me was a really good idea for them in the long run. We'll go over and talk about Felony here in just a second. I just want to kind of talk about the reason why they were probably dropping certain players that they were. But one thing that really stands out to me was their 9-13 hardpoint record and their 8-14 uplink record. To have a 48-45 overall maps and to finish 4th at 13-9 in the overall league goes to show that they are a talented team. But when it comes down to to game types, they are talented mostly at search and destroy. That's what wins them games for the most part. If they can take away at least one respawn, whether it's an uplink, a hardpoint, or a CTF, as long as they win one of those 3 game types, which doesn't happen that often, but whenever one of them doesn't work out, it seems to show that, like, if they didn't win a hardpoint, they probably won the uplink. If they didn't win the uplink, they most likely win the hardpoint prior. And actually, heading into UMG South Carolina, I talked with Vicento, who was kind of talking about his team. They ended up losing to DT. It was like a really late night match, but Vicento was kind of going back and forth with me and Chance, I believe, on the casting desk. And he was like, you know, we've really worked on our hardpoint game. This is something that we really need to kind of focus on because it's where we kind of lose a lot of our momentum. Like, we go into the first game and we end up losing that one. We somehow bring it back on the search and destroy. And I say somehow because of how talented they are. It's not really curious. It's not really that scary, or it's really not that hard to imagine how talented these guys at search and destroy. But kind of coming into Black Ops 3, these guys were looked at to be uplink gods. Like, they were like, you know, a fantastic team back in Advanced Warfare with TR. You know, how would they kind of perform in Black Ops 3? Well, it seems to be, at least in my opinion, I think slaying is ever prevalent, probably more in uplink than it actually is in hardpoint. Throughout the regular season of Black Ops 3, throughout the Stage 1 Call of Duty World League, they actually had some role changes go down. So in the beginning, and like I said, coming back to my point that I made, what, like an hour ago, it feels like, you know, Vicento was the main AR for this team. You know, Vicento was the main AR, Aqua was more of an SMG type of player. Those roles completely switch around with one another. Vicento kind of takes over Remy's role, funny enough, takes over Remy's role of being more of an SMG type of player who likes to sit in the hill. He basically becomes, he goes from an anchor AR, or just an AR in general, to now an objective player solely, which is a massive transition. That was happening around the times of UMG South Carolina. I was wondering, I was like, you know, Vicento's not really pulling out an AR, and I was like, well, he really hasn't been for the last 2 weeks. So around the UMG South Carolina turn, maybe even like that wasn't like a month, but maybe like 2 weeks prior is when they were kind of experimenting with maybe bringing Vicento to more of, you know, a objective role style. So this kind of switched up the roles, meaning that Aqua is now the main AR, obviously becomes more of a scythe player as well, and he does an absolutely fantastic job at that role. So one of those roles definitely worked out. Nagafin now becomes a secondary AR, because it wasn't like Vicento became more of a hybrid. He was solely a submachine gun player, of course with certain maps, you know, and for example, could change him up. But for the most part, he was a hardcore objective player, staying with that role consistently. You know, being a primary heatwave player, maybe on maps, you know, like Stronghold pulls out a Purifier, maybe like a secondary weapon type of player. But for the most part, like I said, he played a hardcore, not hardcore, but more of an objective style role. And coming from an AR anchor is not really, I mean, that's a pretty big transition. That's one extreme to kind of another in some ways, due to role switches, of course, and also due to weapon switches as well. So like I said, this prevents Aqua to kind of moving over to the AR role, the primary AR role. This puts Nagafin in the second line of ARs, and also puts Remy back to more of a kind of a filling of the role type of player, kind of more of a support player, maybe even a slayer at times. And I think personally, through this role switch, this really put Remy in an awkward situation, because imagine being in Remy's position, right? So you're the main objective player for this team. You've been the main objective player for this team for the longest time, because why? He's on Team Revenge for the longest time. He goes over to Epsilon Esports to play with Swanee, Nagafin, and Royalty, where he is more of an objective type of role player. And of course, his Advanced Warfare, I would say it's more of a support player. I wouldn't say there's really like a defined objective player in Advanced Warfare. There were players who did it, you know, players like Sensor, player like Replays, and like Nade Shot, but for the most part, the objective role was not in Advanced Warfare for the most part, like I said. So he goes on to be in Epsilon Esports, like I said, for the longest time, kind of ends his way out of Advanced Warfare, being on Epsilon in A, and being a support-minded objective player. Coming into Black Ops 3, he's playing the exact same role. You know what I mean. And then, of course, to have this kind of transition to kind of happen where he's no longer getting in the hill as often as Vicento is, I think this kind of messed up his overall game plan, because we've seen in past, like players like Spacely back for Luminosity when he was on the roster for Stage 1, he kind of didn't really find his role for the most part, I think, in some ways. I think that's what kind of limited Spacely from being more of a role player in some ways, because he was more of an objective player, more of a support player, and then now he's kind of, in some ways, getting out of his role, because John was a fantastic slayer, like, and also, you know, a hill god, where he would be in the hill constantly, slaying people out like crazy. Well, where does Spacely kind of come into this whole situation? And I've seen with players, sometimes will mention in calls or mention on stream and stuff, they're like, I feel like I'm not doing enough, and I feel like I'm not really performing my role, because, you know, everyone knows new game comes out every single year, and if you're not in some ways ready to switch your role over, or if the game just doesn't work out for you, it's a massive transition. It's like maybe even like a month or 2 month period where you have to get back to either the same role that you were filling in with past, or players like from Black Ops 2 who have kind of over titles kind of switched up the role, or now coming back to that role. Black Ops 3 to me is a massive transition for a lot of players, and it was also a smooth transition for some. Like Octane, for example, in Advanced Warfare, a fantastic AR. Black Ops 3, fantastic AR. And we've also seen with teams like FaZe, who, for example, you know, coming out of Advanced Warfare, switched up their roles like crazy. And I mean, even to like week 9 of Stage 1, we're still switching roles and whatnot. And now that Stage 2 has kind of come around to the end of Stage 1, they finally got the roles similar back to what their roles were back in Advanced Warfare. So like I said, roles to me are completely different, but they can also be extremely similar to Advanced Warfare comparing to even Black Ops 2 going back as far as then. But for me, the eLevate roster in some ways was really struggling as far as roles go, because I don't think Remy really knew, not really didn't know what to do, but whenever you are kind of that mid-hybrid player, like what exactly am I supposed to do for this team? Do I hold out lanes? Do I kind of, you know, push an objective more? Do I kind of hop in the hill when Facento's dead? What do I really do in situations? Do I rotate early for hills? Like, when is it correct for me to pull an AR? Because I'm more of an SMG player for the most of the time. And I think Remy was a great player. Honestly, I really do think he was. I'm not really sure to think about what's really going on with this whole situation between eLevate. You know, the role switches, of course, needed to be changed around, and with Facento kind of taking, in some ways, Remy's role, that kind of left him out to dry in some ways because he really didn't know what to do. And that kind of showcased in the overall KDs. And of course, KD doesn't tell the whole story, but you do look at their game type records as far as regular respawns go, and you see they are lacking in that. Who has the lowest overall KD, lowest respawn KD? And you have to take a look at Remy. Remy had a 0.95, Nogfin and Facento tied with a 0.97, and Aqua had a 1.08 overall. So with that in mind, that was, to me at least, I think the reasoning behind the eLevate change, unless there could have been some internal things. I doubt it. I think these guys are pretty straightforward with one another. There might have been, and I don't know. We'll probably never know that, to be honest. But in my opinion, if they were thinking of this and kind of bringing this out as far as the gameplay point of view, I think that's where they were kind of looking at the eLevate team, the eLevate roster. So now the decision to bring on a player like Felony. So everyone knows the free agent prize pool. Who do you bring on? Who do you don't bring on? They obviously decided to pick up Felony. Felony, for those who don't know, is a free agent in some ways from CLG, and people still are kind of curious as to why, or the reasoning behind players are announcing that they've left their organizations. In some ways, you can basically guarantee, like I said, and I've said this plenty of times before, but it's okay, that if a player for team is not involved with the Call of Duty World League, and they were on a previous roster, was in one, or in some ways on an organization, if a Call of Duty World League spot is open and they're offered it, 90% of the time, they're going to take it. And the only reason why they wouldn't take it is if they don't like the team, they don't like the whole situation, what's going on, the reasoning why they're picking them up. But for the most part, if you are on, like CLG, C9 Eclipse, you know, rosters who didn't make it, Team Liquid, obviously, for example, that we've talked about earlier, being like players like, you know, Apathy, being players like Study as well, who've already gotten on teams, you are technically a free agent, even though you could still be technically on the roster. So, for those who have been tweeting and saying, you know, why didn't Felony announce his loss or his leaving of CLG, technically, he was kind of a free agent to begin with. So, the decision to bring on Felony, to me, is not necessarily a bad one. Felony, right now, is known, at least as far as 8s go, as an online warrior. He is known as a player to just get kills constantly when it comes down to online. In some ways, kind of, not necessarily like a hated player, I hate to say it like that, but he's kind of like a player that's looked down on and said, you know what, he's just an online player. He hasn't really proved himself on LAN. He hasn't really had that moment where he, you know, does crazy stuff. Because I'll go and pull up his placings right now. You can kind of see 9th through 12th, 5th through 6th, I believe is his best placing, which actually happened at UMG Orlando with the pickup team, being on Synergy. But he's not a bad player. That's not to say like Felony is just an online player compared to LAN, but in some ways right now he is kind of considered to be an online player as far as players' opinions go online and you know, in 8s and stuff like that. So to me, Felony, and I think he actually mentioned this in the eLevate announcement on there, like I said, the link in the description, I think he brings up, and he actually said that he's actually going to be the secondary AR, so kind of taking over Nogfin's role in some ways, because Nogfin was the secondary AR, but I've heard Nogfin mentioned in calls like this before, and I was kind of curious too whenever they were looking to pick up someone. My whole opinion on who they were going to pick up based on roles was that, what does Nogfin want to do? Does Nogfin want to go back to more of a SMG type of role because I know he's more comfortable in that, or does he mind rocking an AR, which was the reason why, and the reasoning why everyone was like, well, I mean, to be honest, eLevate has a wide spectrum of what they could choose because Nogfin's really good with an AR. He can also pull out an SMG for maps like Infection, for maps like Breach. Of course, it can vary between SMGs and ARs, of course. So I think the decision to bring on Felony, to me, isn't necessarily a bad one. You know, Felony, like I said, coming off a 12th place Counterlogic Gaming roster, then finishing 6 and 16 in the overall stage 1. You know, 0.95 overall team KD, 14-8 hardpoint, a very good hardpoint team. Whenever it was BL Fire who was still on the roster until they, you know, obviously substituted accuracy in. 11 and 18 in Search and Destroy, 6 and 16 in Uplink, and 6 and 8 in CTF. Obviously, we're not talking about Counterlogic Gaming, but you kind of see the issues that were kind of going on with the CLG roster, and the fact that he actually wasn't really running an AR too often when it came down to Counterlogic Gaming. The two main ARs throughout the season were BL Fire or Accuracy, because, you know, they ended up substituting BL Fire, what, not really halfway through the season, maybe a little bit after halfway through the season for Accuracy, who was still the main AR, so his role didn't really switch up too much being Felony. And they also brought on Perplex for Complex, who just kind of changed up the objective players, and it was Methods who was the secondary AR for most of the maps. I know for certain things Felony brought it out, and I know in some ways Felony prefers to run an AR. I think he kind of prefers to run an AR for most of the time. And to me personally, I'm kind of indifferent on what he really wants to do on this team. I'm not really sure what exactly they're trying to strive to do. You know, I think Felony, to me, definitely provides a better better slaying presence for them, but as far as objectively goes, I'm not sure how Nagafin's going to make that transition over. Like I said, this stuff is going to take some time. I'm not even watching the Call of Duty World League right now, but I need to, and I'm definitely going to be studying and watching how they play against Optic Gaming, and I might actually be posting a video, you know, talking about, and as far as strategics go, as far as analysis goes behind their team play, you know, versus a roster like Optic Gaming. So, you know, Felony, who's been a player, I mean, I first learned about Felony coming from, I believe, Automatic Reload at the MLG Columbus Open for, I think it was like the first event for Advanced Warfare. I know he played alongside, I think he actually played alongside BL Fire, Miyagi, I think Burns. I think he played alongside of Burns, if I'm correct on that. Like I said, I think he went over to Synergy. Then I think XGN was the roster he went for alongside, might have been Cole Chan, who's obviously now on TSM, and Pac-Man, who's on TSM. BL Fire, who was obviously his previous teammate on Automatic Reload and also on CLG. And then I believe he went over to VVV for a short time. Didn't really have a whole lot of success with those guys. You know, team with actually 3 other players who are now in the league. John, who's now on Envious, and Fizzerp and Fears, who are currently over on H2K. Then I believe he went to, I'm trying to remember, I'm sorry, I really should be looking this stuff up. I think he went to E6, where they had a terrible team, no offense to them, but they really did not have the best showing whatsoever. I believe that was at one of the UMG events. And then I think he went over to XGN one more time, and then I think he ended up joining, yeah, he went to XGN, I remember, he went to XGN alongside of Killa, Study, and someone else, I forget, might have been Fizzerp, might have been Study. Well, I already said Study. Fizzerp, Killa, and Study, I think is who he played alongside of at MLG World Finals. I remember that because I actually ended up shooting some videos, and I had him in the montage of stuff like that. Then he later obviously joined alongside of Canology Gaming, and so on and so forth. I really didn't need to give CLG's roster, or his roster, Felony's roster history, including CLG, but that's kind of like what he's really going to be doing. He's going to be the secondary AR, but right behind Aqua. I'm really curious to see how they play. I think it's definitely going to take some time for them. I think their Search and Destroy is still going to be fairly good. I think definitely, I mean, you still have Aqua, who had the secondary, or I think the second or third highest KD as far as search goes. You have Nagavin, who's still kind of in competition with the top S&D player right now for Stage 2. You definitely have players like Royalty, players like Havoc on the new rosters being a contest between them, but Nagavin, without a doubt, I think he had like a 1.35 on S&D throughout the regular season, of course, having the top record in Search and Destroy is eLevate. So I think this is honestly a fairly good pickup for them. You could also argue, you know, different players who they should pick up in his position. I think as far as online goes, and I hate to say that online Call of Duty is a thing now, but for the most part, what, 80-90% of the Call of Duty for right now is all online. You know, kind of keep in mind that events are coming up. Anaheim, ESWC, and actually EGLX, which I'll be making a video on very shortly. But guys, let me know in the comments what you guys think about the new eLevate pickup of Bing Felony. What you guys' thoughts are. I think he's going to be fairly good. I don't think this is going to be an eLevate team who struggles necessarily. I don't know if we're going to see them have the exact same record, the exact same success that they did from Stage 1. I think, honestly, though, that's going to be the level of play that's now brought up in Stage 2. I think there are more talented teams, more talented players, or I should say just organizations and groups in Stage 2 compared to Stage 1. But yeah, guys, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, your thoughts on the new roster, the subtraction of Remy, because honestly, I'm not really sure where Remy goes at this point, because, I mean, he's played with some of these guys for the longest time, and he's played with, what, Nagafin for maybe, like, the last year or so, especially since COD Champs and even a little bit before that. Where does Remy go from now? That's something that I should have brought up during the regular part of the video. Where does Remy go from this point? Like, where does he kind of go? You know, he's obviously a free agent right now. He doesn't really play 8 that often. He doesn't really know players that well, at least from what I know, at least. And what team really needs an objective player or a support player like him? That's going to be the question to be asking right now. Also, put down in the comments what rosters Remy could potentially go to if he does have an option. I think right now he'll probably just be a substitute, if anything, at all. But yeah, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. I really appreciate you guys for coming and checking this one out. If you guys are curious and would like to, make sure to go ahead and click that subscribe button if you guys haven't already for future content just like this. And also make sure to leave a like if you guys did enjoy the video or learned anything new. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Going to be in Canada this weekend. I'll be posting a video, like I said, a little bit later, possibly tomorrow, about what's really going on and kind of, you know, an event that I'm going to be casting at. So guys, like I said, thank you so much for watching this video. Yeah, again, I'll see you guys all later. Have a fantastic day, and until next time, peace out.